Recently, one of my good friends has told me that people are generally very smart and rational beings who can easily recognize the truth when they see one. And if these flat earth claims that I make in my videos were anywhere close to being true and accurate, then a lot more qualified people who are apparently more intelligent, those people and experts from renowned universities and colleges and various scientific and government institutions, plus giant corporations, would have jumped all over this topic of our Earth being a vastly flattened stationary plane, not a planet. And the entire world would have taken this issue much more seriously, attracting much more heat and spotlight, eventually making it the single biggest scandal in the history of mankind. But sadly, he sees virtually no one talking about this topic, at least no one around him in South Korea. Therefore, he has no choice but to conclude that this whole flat earth movement must be some kind of a large-scale charade or some form of a new age religious cult, at best. Basically, he was saying that he couldn't believe any of the hard evidence or logic presented in my videos, and all of my videos were pretty much garbage. Well, he didn't exactly say it like that, but we both knew that's what he meant to say. Of course, I was a bit annoyed by all this, but I was used to it. This is not my first rodeo, and I've grown to be quite used to people rejecting and even ridiculing a lot of my ideas at first. So I decided not to go in any further arguing with my good friend at that moment. But instead, I'm making this video about basic human psychology and our inherent desire for constant social acceptance, and how this powerful human nature is secretly being used against our will to blind us from the ultimate truth and to prevent this topic of flat earth from spreading like wildfire. So, what do you think? Do you believe that people are generally rational and logical beings, and we can easily distinguish what's right from what's wrong, and actually follow through with our own actions once we realize the truth?
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think right now.
Oh yeah, right now and pretty much all year round, we're being heavily influenced by this massive peer pressure of being socially accepted and approved by as many people around us as possible. And as you can see in this short experiment, the girl in purple sweater not only tried to follow this irrational and ridiculous behavior of the larger crowd, but she actually influenced other people to follow suit, probably getting a little kick out of setting a brand new norm for the group, without even carefully examining the real reason or logic behind such a bizarre action of blind obedience. And although most people did try to show a certain degree of doubt and hesitation at first, in the end, all of them consciously chose to go with the flow with little or no questions asked. And I find this very interesting, don't you? Okay, let's check out another one called the Solomon Asch Conformity Experiment, and we'll see just how rational we tend to become under pressure.
The Asch Experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the three lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1. 1.
2.
1.
Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3. 3. 3.
3.
3.
The Asch experiment has been repeated many times, and the results have been supported again and again. We will conform to the group. Again, we're very social creatures. We're very much aware of what the people around us think. We want to be liked. We don't want to be seen to rock the boat, so we will go along with the group. Even if we don't believe what people are saying, we'll still go along.
1. 1. 1. 1.
Group dynamics is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology.
Now, here's another interesting experiment. This time, a whole bunch of actors will intentionally face the backside of the elevator as they get in, so we can observe how the innocent participants, shown in purple, will react to this bizarre and uncomfortable pressure inside this tiny elevator. Now the peer pressure is slowly building up, and she's sensing something is very different about this elevator. Okay, here, a girl gets out, and another girl gets in, only to face backwards again. At which point our participant goes, "Oh, fuck it. Obviously these people know something that I don't." And finally decides to choose her own instinctive desire for social acceptance over any tangible rationality, reason, or logic. Now again, same drill, but different participant. Let's see how long this one holds out until she gives in to the crowd. Oh yeah, we can see that she's definitely sensing something very awkward in the air. Here, a new girl gets in to give that last push, but she doesn't seem to give out 100% yet. See how her body's tilted at 45 angle? Obviously she wants to turn, but she's also fighting to figure out why she should. But in the end, most of them do surrender. Now, let's look at another very famous experiment called the bystander effect.
Place like this street in New York City, if you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill.
Help! Help!
How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help! Help me. Please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is two conflicting rules. One is the rule we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help, and it's very difficult to rebel.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm all right.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
Why you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group, everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past, so I'd just like to check that he was okay. And I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
So, are we learning a thing or two about our true nature when it comes to social conformity? Now for the last example, which undoubtedly demonstrate how actions of an individual can be quite sensible and rational, but when we are placed into a large group, we would go as far as risking our own lives and the lives of those around us merely to satisfy this powerful itch for mass social acceptance.
This hotel conference suite has been prepared for a focus group discussion on internet shopping. But all is not as it seems. We've been busy. The place is rigged with 4 hidden cameras and 6 concealed microphones. And psychology professor Dominic Abrams is watching from our control room, which we've built in an adjoining suite.
Now it's just a question of sitting and waiting.
Right, so this is a questionnaire all about kind of shopping habits and everything here. So just move that off your chair. So you...
Our first participant is Mary Mizuno, a London student who thinks she's arrived early. What she doesn't know is that behind this door there's about to be a serious fire in the hotel kitchen, or at least the illusion of one, created by a smoke machine and some sound effects. What will she do?
She's now noticed the smoke and is concerned. At this point, she decides to investigate to find out what's going on. She's immediately taken responsibility for figuring out what to do.
Mary does the sensible thing and evacuates quickly. She even leaves her bag and coat.
As I've never been in a fire situation before, I tried to remember the kind of things that you're supposed to do, so I left my stuff and just went out.
But Mary was on her own. This time, we've planted 7 actors who are all in on the experiment. We've said to them, when you see the smoke, do nothing. Our second participant is Lauren Heffernan, also a student. What will she do?
In this situation, she'll be following a script. The script is partly written in her mind. It's a script which is borrowed from things like sitting exams. Most situations like this have some element of expected or scripted behaviour.
But what will happen to her script when we make a slightly unusual situation very unusual? Nothing to start with, so we get her attention. Now, how long before she dashes out of the room?
She's checking increasingly to see what the other people are thinking. But who can she appeal to? The answer is nobody. She turns to the norm of the group. Ignore the smoke. In a real fire, the people in this group would be in very serious danger by now.
I was looking for some sort of reaction from someone else, even just the slightest little thing, that they'd recognise that there was something, you know, going on here. For me to kind of react on that and then do something about it, I kind of needed prodding.
She's waiting for someone else to react. Why isn't anyone else reacting? She feels uncomfortable. She doesn't want to embarrass herself by taking the lead, taking action. But something is definitely wrong.
Lauren stayed in the room for 20 minutes after spotting the smoke, concerned but immobile. The fire brigade say that if this fire had been real, even if flames hadn't burnt through the door, she would have died of asphyxiation in this time. In the end, we had to ask her to leave.
What about him? Thanks. I was surprised that I didn't do anything at all. I was just literally waiting. I just thought that someone else is surely going to say something soon. And because no one else did, I just didn't react at all.
We tried the experiment 10 times, and the same thing happened over and over again. If the person was on their own, they left quickly. If they were in a group of 3 or more, they stayed, rooted to the spot. The average length of time they stayed, 13 minutes.
So, these are some of the most popular and well-known social conformity experiments in the world of psychology today. And if you're interested, just type in social conformity as your search word and you'll find tons of similar materials either on YouTube or Google. But I think the lessons here are pretty much unanimous and self-explanatory. This powerful pressure of social conformity often places heavy burden on our ability to make intelligent and rational choices. And our subconscious desire for social acceptance is much greater than the desire to be right, honest, or truthful. The confidence level of our own perception and judgment drops significantly when challenged by a large number of people with different views and beliefs. Social conformity can cause a diffused sense of morality, and it can also create strong bias toward a certain group of people. And lastly, this desperation for social acceptance is so powerful that sometimes we'll risk our own lives just to be accepted and approved by those around us. So, if we have a hard time coping with the weight of social pressure from merely 5 or 6 total strangers around us, what do you think we would do under the pressure of our closest friends and family members? Would you be willing to go against your entire neighborhood if you knew something to be 100% true in your heart? How about the entire school that you attend to, or the entire company that you work for? How about an entire nation, or even an entire world? Well, as these short experiments clearly shows, most of us simply cannot handle the swing of this massive social pressure built into our culture. And evidently, this powerful subconscious desire to fit into a larger group, a group that's deemed as well respected and admired by the majority of people in a given society, is and has always been the single most powerful aspect of the human mind that is constantly being misused and taken advantage of by those men in power throughout history. So they can help generate various social norms and standards that are not necessarily based on truth or actual reality, but ones that are strategically more beneficial for the current standings of social hierarchy and order. And in turn, these hard-set norms and standards will create a predetermined social frame of mind, an invisible prison, if you will, that you cannot see or smell or touch. And these intangible yet concrete bars of social standards will also work as a powerful defense mechanism, deflecting off any and all ideas, logic, or perceptions that may pose a great threat to the status quo of the system. Just quietly quarantine them into a far corner of society and lump them together with the most undesirable group of people. This is Politics 101, and people have been doing this since the beginning of time. And it's because most of us are still trapped inside this invisible prison of thought. When we see twin towers collapsing almost straight down to the ground, within a very narrow range of destruction, trying to minimize possible damage onto surrounding properties and buildings, the more sensible and reasonable side of our minds should tell us that this is a typical characteristic of a controlled demolition case. As we can see here. You see how the buildings go down in a relatively straight line, in a clean, orderly, and synchronized fashion? Well, of course, after all, these are carefully planned and controlled demolitions, with heavy focus on minimizing damage to the surroundings. Again, do you not see the pattern yet? But when demolitions are poorly planned or executed, or when buildings collapse on its own naturally, this happens. See how you can see large chunks of buildings still very much intact? And because of the height and weight of these heavy chunks of buildings, naturally they simply cannot come straight down, but rather they always lose balance and start leaning to one side and fall sideways. I mean, you don't have to be a fucking expert to realize that this is how things work in our actual reality. And the Twin Towers should have gone down in a similar fashion of these failed demolition attempts. Obviously because the Twin Towers are not supposed to be a controlled demolition case, right? Now here, this is how it should have went down on 9/11. A large portion of the building still very much intact, but given its extreme height and weight, it naturally loses its balance and falls sideways. Just as it should in a realistically unplanned and unexpected event. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I'm sure most of you have played this game called JENGA sometime in your life. Then do you ever remember those wooden blocks of tower falling down in a straight line? Never. They always fall to the sides. Always. Plus, the large chunks of tower almost always remains very much intact before it hits the ground. Just like it should in real life. Think about it. But you wanna tell me that not one, but two of the tallest buildings in the world somehow came crashing down in a clean, straight line path, while maintaining perfect balance with no large chunks of buildings intact, leaning or falling sideways? In fact, for some unknown reason, both buildings start to get pulverized into smaller pieces on its way down, in exactly the same top-to-bottom or bottom-to-top synchronized fashion we see only in those controlled demolition settings, perfectly avoiding to hit all other buildings nearby. I mean, what the fuck? Really? How can anyone with sensible mind actually buy into this huge pile of shit? Oh, I know, because we saw it on TV and we saw all the famous and important people come out from media, politics, economics, science, and education displaying their deepest concerns and condolences for this terrible act of violence. And right there, the invisible bars of social standards and norms were already being set and engraved into our subconscious. And oddly enough, just minutes after the incident, the official narratives were being put in place live on television. That the two most important symbols of capitalism and democracy came crashing down, and the lives of Americans were lost due to this horrifying act of terrorism. So although there are countless inconsistencies and obvious flaws in the actual mechanics and technicalities of these so-called terrorist events, like the ones that I showed you just now, anyone who asked too many questions or suggested an alternate view on the matter instantly raised eyebrows all around, and it didn't take long for them to be deemed and labeled as the crazy hardcore conspiracy nutcases. And over time, most of their factual evidence and valid arguments slowly went stale and got buried under the heavy, suffocating weight of the norms of our society. Now here's another foul play of social conformity being used against us to blind us from seeing the real truth of our world. They say the sun is 93 million miles away from us and all the planets of the solar system are orbiting around the sun. Now, the sun simply cannot be 93 million miles away from us because I don't care how big the sun is, our eyes simply cannot see anything that far off into the distance of some 90 plus million miles away, period. It's physiologically impossible because our eyes have a distinct limitation to our natural vision and perspective, where the further objects move away from us, the smaller and smaller they appear into the vanishing point. For instance, they say the sun is around 100 times bigger than the Earth, and Mount Everest is about 29,000 feet in height, which is around 4,000 times taller than an average man. So, if an average man were standing right in front of Mount Everest and start moving away from it, this huge mountain that's 4,000 times bigger will undoubtedly start to appear smaller and smaller, and eventually it'll disappear completely into this man's vanishing point. And this disappearing act of Mount Everest certainly will not take 93 million miles to occur, more like 200 or 300 miles at best. So the fact that we can very much see the sun with our own naked eyes is a living proof that the sun is not 93 million miles away, but hell of a lot much closer. Make sense? On top of that, as I mentioned before in my previous video, it simply gets way too hot in our summertime. Matter of fact, in some parts of the world, it gets so hot you can literally cook eggs or steaks off the heat of the asphalt, or bake cookies inside of a car. But wait, I thought the space was colder than the coldest regions on Earth. According to mainstream science, the space is around negative 450 degrees Fahrenheit. But somehow this magical heat energy of the sun is able to travel this whopping distance of 93 million miles of negative 450 degree Fahrenheit environment and still strike the Earth with this much fierce heat and light? I mean, again, what the fuck? Does this make any sense to you at all? How could any kind of heat wave or heat energy, no matter how hot it is, travel some 90 plus million miles of negative 450 degrees Fahrenheit space and somehow still remain hot enough after all those time and distance to burn human skins, to cook eggs and steaks, to bake cookies, to cause droughts, to steam off ocean waters, and to dry lakes, and etc., etc.? I mean, if this was really the case, then the space would be a flaming hot living hell because the sun's raw energy of heat and light would instantly turn everything into burning ashes. So, is it just me or are we seeing another huge problem here? But I think the real problem here is not that those men in power are lying to their own people. But we the people are constantly letting them take advantage of us, and we choose to do nothing about it. So, I could go on and on about all the obvious holes and flaws of this fake reality they're forcing upon all of us. But I'm gonna stop here because I don't want to be too redundant. Please refer to my Flat Earth Renaissance series if you want more enlightening facts and evidence proving our Earth to be one giant, stationary level plane. So, like I said many times before, if you just apply a small dosage of real and genuine logic and intellect, this fragile delusion of fake space and galaxies and self-spinning ball Earth all starts to crumble down like the Twin Towers on 9/11. Because all of this is a lie. And all lies are doomed to be self-contradictory, going back and forth around the never-ending cycle of dissonant paradox. But unfortunately, for most people, what matters more than discovering and understanding the truth is to look around and search for what kind of group they would like to see themselves belong to. And how certain groups make us feel usually determine the final action and behavior of us as individuals. And this is precisely why those who speak too much truth and knowledge that are beyond the boundaries of social standard, or those who shed too much light onto some of the darkest areas of our crooked culture, have always been systematically ridiculed and vilified, and constantly pushed away into the far corners of our society by those men and women in power, so their dangerous words and ideas will never be loud enough to reach and influence the great majority of the people. Just open up any history book and you'll see that it's not the first time that people who speak the truth are deemed as crazy outcasts, and people who conform to the general rules of society as the much respected role models. And these unsung heroes who live and die for their honest truth and dignity are often abandoned, crucified, or brutally executed in public for everyone to see as an example. So, although we humans in general may be predominantly much more social than rational beings, this doesn't have to be a bad thing, because it doesn't always mean that we prefer to make irrational choices at the cost of being accepted into a large group of our choice. But it may just mean that we all have the capacity of being extremely intelligent and logical as individuals. But our deep longing to be loved and to love one another is simply much greater than our individual need and desire to always be better than everyone else. And if I was being really optimistic, this could also mean that we are all genetically wired to care more about us as a whole than just me, and me. So, if this strong tendency for social conformity was used in a positive way rather than negative, if this powerful human nature was actually used for the betterment of the entire human race, rather than for manipulation and dominance of the people by the very few holding the reign on top, like setting up a brand new social standard for what's right and what's wrong, a brand new standard for what's true and what's not, a brand new standard for what's good and what's bad, a brand new standard for who we are and what we are here to do, and a brand new standard for the true meaning and purpose in life, then maybe, just maybe, the entire world could transform into a totally different place for all of us. But until that day comes, this dream of a brand new world will continue to be my wish and something to keep on fighting for.